Welcome back, everyone. I am pumped up and excited from a day of being able to interact with all of you, to connect, to really talk about what we're going through right now, how can we support each other through it. And so here in the studio, we also were able to grab some lunch and sort of hang around a communal table. And for me, it's so incredibly fun to be able to welcome Lindsay to our studio.
Yay.
We have gotten to know Lindsay over the last few years, and she's one of those badass chicks that you just are glad to have in your life. And so today we're just gonna spend a few moments talking with her about her perspective of the industry, how she keeps things going, her personal tips and tricks for how she blazes through and sets new paths. And so I'll do a little bit of bragging introduction for her because she's the CEO of Nifty Method Marketing, and she's an accomplished speaker, although I have seen her many times backstage with a headset where I think she prefers to be. She's also a host of Event Icons, an event professional and a marketer, and her work has been featured in the New York Times, which is a pretty big accolade. And she's worked with brands including Ford Motor Company, the American Bar Association, Harvard Business School, and so many more organizations, putting her strategic brain to play in how we think about changing up events to meet business goals and objectives. So she's also going to be doing a session on demand at the next studio tour at the end of September. So I'm excited to hear her perspectives of scenario planning for 2022 and beyond, which we all know is one of the most important aspects of our job long term. So we're going to get to chat here for just a minute, but I also want to give a quick shout out to our production studio partner. We're here in Portland locally, and Seamless Events has just been an incredible partner for us, whether it's talking about how we think about bringing that in-person experience hybrid, how we think about being in a studio, even shot calling. We were getting the countdown here so that we can look professional and great. So really excited to be partnering with them and getting their professional AV support and production support here in the studio. Okay, so Lindsay,
Allie.
if you had one word to describe your current perspective on life right now, I'm throwing a little bit of a change at you.
I like it. Well, it was good. We were talking earlier about my 2020 tattoo I was trying to get removed, pivot, right? Because no one wants that one. But I think my current word to describe life is it's more of a phrase, in the moment. You know, we had a client recently we were talking with who was talking about how you can't audit life. You just have to live in the now. And I think more than anything, whether it's business or professional or personal, that's a place where it's really been a North Star for me, because so much of my life was mapped out. Like, I'm supposed to be going to Vegas next week. We're not. We're doing something marketing, not events. We're having conversations about the trade shows that we're typically at, and we're not. Because who knows if we're going to have them, and if we do, why are we really going this year? Because the events world is unstable, and so we're trying to go. It's still going to be fine. It's still going to work out. We're not pivoting at this point. We're going nope, in the now. We're going to take this day, and tomorrow is another day. Don't borrow the trouble you don't have yet.
That's so true. There's so much that could weigh us down on a daily basis, and so just that act of grounding,
yes,
and being able to not future trip. I think that's a huge thing for me over the years, is I would always future trip about everything. And I find in today's landscape, even if I did future trip, it's sort of pointless, because whatever I was future tripping about is totally different within 24 hours because of how much change is happening in our world.
Yeah, no, we were sitting there talking about international incentive trips, right? We have a couple of clients who they love to do them. It's the highlight of the year. And they were like, what do you think? And I was like, that's January. We can't talk about January yet.
Yeah.
And they were like, we always used to have a plan. I'm like, no, we still have a plan, but we're not going to talk about location plans yet, because if you sign that contract at this point in time, we don't know what we can do about it. So let's just kind of watch and wait. The venues, they're there. They're holding hands with us to jump off the cliff. So omnia paratus, right? If you're Gilmore Girls plans, we got to figure out a way to hold hands and just together on the way down.
Yeah. How do you find when you go to talk to customers about a different perspective, a new way of doing things? They obviously are reporting up to their executive leadership who have totally different expectations. So what are you finding are sort of some rocks that you hold on to when you're talking to customers in terms of trying to get them to understand the agility needed and to be able to bring that up the chain?
We're really basing it in the participant they're supposed to have. And we're saying, you have all of these other people sitting at your table you have to answer to. But at the end of the day, the only one any of us needs to answer to is the participant. Can they get there? What is their company saying? What is their family saying? What is the health situation? What is their child care situation? What does that look like from does it make sense financially, which was always a question before, but now it's even more so important. So we're really grounding it in the end user's experience. It's so funny, the conversations we used to only have with people who worked in software, that design thinking, and that's all Nifty Method is at this point, is what is your participant needing, wanting, doing, and are you serving that? And if you aren't serving that, then the rest of the stuff you're trying to accomplish is going to fall flat, because they're too far gone on Maslow's hierarchy need. They need to take care of them before they can do the rest.
That's so true. I mean, even thinking about event design and how we think about how we set up an agenda, even when it's digital, right? I mean, it would be really easy for us to just go back to back all day long, right? But if we think about the human component of what do people need in the moment, that might be different. They need a break. They need to go grab water. They need an opportunity to get their brain oriented around new strategic topics. So as you're thinking about this sort of whole persona, how do you actually get to know the persona?
Well, we do it two different ways. One is we talk to them. I mean, it's always amazing to me every time we are working with a potential event client. We say, well, how well do you know your participants? And they have a lot of assumptions. They've got a lot of things that people have told them, a lot of notes, but they don't necessarily have focus group information. They don't have conversations. And it's interesting, this is association and corporate. And I'm like, why aren't you talking to people? Why the people who are coming to your show, and don't ask them at the end of it. We do a lot of post-event surveys.
Sure.
But you don't see a lot of pre-event surveys. You make assumptions about the reality. So that's the first one from that persona. And then a lot of it is research. We go out and we think about, okay, we think this is what they've told us they want. And then we model out a lot of different scenarios, which I know it sounds cheesy because we're plugging my session, but it really is. It's like we scenario plan for those different scenarios. And then rather thinking of it like a linear forecast, if the bottom drops out of one scenario, we come and shift to the other one, because at the end of the day, every scenario is oriented around helping that person at the center of the persona, because that's the biggest thing that I think most of us forget, events and marketer people. We don't think that the persona is a real person. It's becomes this archetype we're working towards. They're people, just like you. They miss the bad food at the Marriott. They want the terrible gin that they serve at the happy hours so we can all mock the bartender later. They want the hallway conversation. So I think that's a piece where you really have to have that seesaw back and forth to keep the human in the center of it all.
Has that always been your perspective, or how have things changed for you over the last 18 months as you thought about this new world of events?
I mean, a lot of ours is that we don't have the research we've typically had. There are things you expect for pharmaceutical meetings. There are things you expect for, hospitality events. And we were doing a networking session earlier today, and we were talking about the expectations of attendees who've always had live music at an event. And now it's like this weird, creepy Zoom call where like the worst of the 80s is playing in the background, and some person's like, yeah, it's gonna be awesome, with their like Bic or lighter, and you're like, no, this is not awesome. And so that's been something where typically when we ran into walls like that, we would go and we would research it, because we have the attendee information for the aspirations of what they're hoping towards. We have the concreteness of the budget that we can do and the reality of what we're planning for the goal of the event. And this was that third part of the three-legged stool. And a lot of us don't have a plan. And the typical places we go to find a plan, they are in many ways just as confused as we are. Because we're all kind of like, this feels like a good plan, let's do that. Right? And so I think that's been a place we're coming back into the network and just asking the peer groups, well, what are you doing? I've gone to more webinars in the last 18 months, and I've been working in events for 20 years. But I attend them now. And that's been the chat bot and just kind of talking it, that's been a really great place. And that's been a shift, because before we would attend them, but not for, I think, as many of the right reasons as we attend them now. Yeah, the beauty of having everything digital is the data that we can get and how we can learn in a very tangible way and quantify as well as we continue to go through this. So as a badass boss and growing a company, what does that mean for you, like for you personally? So we've talked a lot today about growing professionally and personally, and being able to sort of get through the hard stuff, to be able to see the good and to be able to think differently. So what has that journey been like for you personally, and how have you looked at giving yourself strength over the last 18 months? I think a lot of this has been centered around forgiveness. I am a stereotypical type A, perfection is the top bot we're working towards, right? And so I've really had to relearn the mantra, done is better than perfect. And by allowing forgiveness in my space, it allows me to open it up over here, because I think there are different levels of experience and expectation that both we as an industry are dealing with, but also as companies. Like my business before the pandemic was an events company that did marketing. And now we are primarily a marketing company that does events.
Yeah.
And it has been this massive culture shift for us to talk about it. And it's been an identity shift. Like, I'm an event planner. I've been an event manager since like 1996. And so now I'm like, God, if I'm not an event manager, what am I? And what does that look like? So I think that's been a lot of it, and my staff has bore the brunt of it sometimes, because I just have an identity crisis in the middle of a stand up. And so, you know, the forgiveness piece is big, but also not being online. One of the best things about in-person events is that it forces you to be away from the stuff. You're surrounded by people, but there's space. And I think that disconnect, you know, no pun intended, the untetheredness of it all is an element that I would hope many people will find and allow themselves to take those breaks so they can recharge to move forward.
Yeah. It's so interesting when our whole world is online,
Yeah.
how our brain functions very, very differently. And that word of grace
Yes.
for ourselves
Yes.
really is, I don't think, something that comes naturally to people who are used to driving value from execution.
Exactly.
And I think I found that for myself over the last couple of years is I used to get satisfaction from crossing off this huge long list of things that I had to do. And then as soon as the event was over, I might take a day off before I was on to post-show and on to the next thing. And there really wasn't that moment of allowing myself the grace and the understanding and the celebration.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you know, as we go into 2022 and that scenario planning and thinking about what's next and beyond, you know, that those words of wisdom can really help carry us a long way, because what we do is not easy.
No, it's not.
Tough.
It is.
And so, you know, having that mentality really allows us to have a growth mindset, which is so important as we think about the future.
Yeah, and to rediscover yourself. Like, that's been something else that, like, if we could leave you with anything, is you are more than just your career, right? And it is silly. Like, I got goats, but I'm not on an airplane 70% of the time. So you can have goats now, but like someday you will be on an airplane 70% again. So how do you maintain those ties? And so allowing yourself that space. I'm excited to hear what all of you all discover. And if you've got goats too, what are you doing with them? What are you feeding them?